Jack Mercer slowly walked down the dark, empty corridors of the abandoned station. His footsteps echoed off the steel walls, each one a stark reminder that he was completely alone in this forsaken place. The station had been silent for decades, but now, as he explored, it was clear that something wasn't right. The air was thick with dust, the screens flickered with static, and the strange hum of a long-forgotten power source pulsed in the background. As an ex-Marine, Jack had seen his fair share of abandoned military outposts and wrecked ships, but nothing like this. There was something about this station that felt off. His mission was simple: gather intel and salvage anything valuable. But the deeper he went, the more his gut told him that there was something here, something important, something dangerous. After hours of searching through empty rooms and deactivated systems, Jack found it, the central control room. It was locked, but not securely. A few quick moves with his tools, and the door slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside, the air was cold, and the faint glow of monitors was the only light that lit up the room. The station's mainframe was alive, somehow still running after all these years. It was a miracle in itself, but it was also a mystery. Jack approached the console. It hummed to life as he placed his hand on the controls, and the screen blinked, asking for a password. It wasn't just any security. This was deep-level clearance. His heart skipped a beat. This was not just a salvage operation. This was something more. He began typing in codes and guesses, searching for any clues that could get him through the encryption. Then, with a slight buzz, the screen flickered and displayed a single message: access granted. The flood of information that came next was overwhelming. Files, logs, records, everything began pouring onto the screen in rapid succession. Jack felt a pit form in his stomach. What he saw wasn't just data. It was history. Hidden, buried history. As he began scrolling through the logs, one in particular caught his eye. A file labeled Alliance Protocols. Curious and cautious, Jack opened the file. What he saw shook him to his core. The document described something known as the Forbidden Alliance, an agreement between humans and an alien species, the Exhilarating. It was signed off by several high-ranking military officers, and its goal was clear: to create a secret alliance with the Exhilarating in exchange for technology that would give humanity an edge in the galactic war. The Exhilarating weren't allies out of goodwill. They had their own hidden agenda. They wanted to use the human race as pawns in a much larger, darker plan. But humanity had no choice. Their very survival depended on it. The more Jack read, the darker the story became. The Alliance was meant to be a covert operation, something that would stay buried in the deepest vaults of military secrecy. But then, something went terribly wrong. The file detailed how a group of humans and Silurians worked together to create a new breed of soldiers, hybrids, part human, part Silurian. These soldiers were to be used as weapons, soldiers that could fight in the war with enhanced strength, speed, and intelligence. But the hybrids didn't stay loyal for long. Something triggered their rebellion, and they turned on their creators, killing many of the humans and Silurians who had worked on the project. A chill ran down Jack's spine as he read the next log entry. It was a message from Commander Layla Grant, the last known officer aboard Vanguard Station. Her voice came through in a series of recordings, each one more desperate than the last. The logs painted a grim picture of the final days aboard the station. The hybrids were no longer under control, and the crew was being picked off one by one. Some of the logs were barely legible, corrupted by the chaos that had erupted. But Jack could still make out the haunting message: we're being watched. There are forces beyond our understanding, beyond our control. We may have unleashed something that will destroy us all. As Jack sat back in his chair, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. The logs he was reading were not just some ancient military secret. They were a warning that he had stumbled upon at the worst possible time. The station, Vanguard Station, was no ordinary outpost. It was the center of a project that could change the fate of humanity forever, and it had been abandoned for a reason. The hybrids had killed everyone, and the truth had been buried. But now, as Jack uncovered these secrets, he realized that the consequences of this forbidden alliance were far from over. Before he could process the magnitude of what he had just uncovered, the station's lights flickered again. This time, the entire control room seemed to come alive. The hum in the walls grew louder, and the once dormant systems seemed to be reacting to his presence. It was almost as if the station itself was aware of him. As Jack tried to make sense of the information on the screen, a strange, static-filled message flashed across the console. "You should not have come here." Jack's heart raced. The message was unmistakably clear. Someone, or something, was trying to stop him from accessing these files. And as the hum of the station grew louder, Jack realized that he was not alone. The silence that had hung in the air for so long was gone. Something was out there, something he couldn't yet understand. The hybrid soldiers, the Tylorians, whatever had gone wrong here, it was still a threat. And Jack Mercer had just opened the door to something far worse than he could have ever imagined. With his hands shaking, Jack quickly backed away from the console, his mind racing. What had he unleashed? What had he just learned? One thing was certain: this station, these logs, this secret, they were just the beginning. And the real danger was only now starting to make itself known. Jack Mercer stood frozen for a moment, staring at the monitor in disbelief. The message was clear: you should not have come here. The screen blinked once more, then went dark. The room fell into an eerie silence. The hum of the station's systems, once a constant background noise, now seemed unnaturally loud, vibrating through the steel floor beneath his boots. His breath quickened, his instincts on high alert. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. He wasn't alone, not in the way he had hoped. But Jack knew better than to panic. He was an ex-Marine, trained to handle unexpected situations. He couldn't afford to be rattled. The mystery behind the abandoned Vanguard station was unfolding faster than he had anticipated, and he needed answers. What was this forbidden alliance? What had happened here? And why was it so important that someone, or something, wanted to stop him from learning the truth? He quickly re-entered the command sequence, his fingers flying over the console. He had no choice but to push forward. The logs, whatever they were too important to abandon now. Jack's curiosity burned hotter than his fear. What had they been hiding? The console blinked to life once more. The station's operating system seemed to recognize his persistence. A new screen popped up, displaying a list of encrypted files. Some were marked as top-level clearance, others buried deep within restricted access codes. One file in particular stood out to him: Project Xenogenesis. Subject: Hybrid Soldier Initiative. Jack's stomach twisted. The term xenogenesis wasn't something he had ever heard in military protocol, but he knew enough to understand that it wasn't good. He clicked on the file, and as the screen loaded, his eyes narrowed. It wasn't just a list of experiments. It was a history. The dark, twisted history of human and alien collaboration. And the results were nothing short of horrifying. The logs told a story of a covert alliance between humanity's highest-ranking officials and an alien race known as the Hylorians. According to the records, the Hylorians were an ancient species with technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. In exchange for their advanced weapons and knowledge, the humans agreed to help the Hylorians in their secret war against an unknown enemy. But the alliance wasn't just political, it was biological. The humans had agreed to collaborate on genetic experiments, hoping to create the perfect soldier. They would combine human DNA with that of the Hylorians, blending the strengths of both species to create a race of super soldiers capable of fighting in the galactic war. But something went wrong. Horribly wrong. The hybrid soldiers, half human, half Hylorian, grew stronger and smarter than the humans ever anticipated. Their loyalty, however, was never guaranteed. As Jack read through the logs, a chilling realization settled over him. These hybrids were not just soldiers. They were monsters. Experiments that went rogue, killing the very people who had created them. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the hybrids weren't finished. They were still here, in the shadows, waiting. One log in particular, dated just days before the station's last transmission, caught Jack's attention. The entry was from Commander Layla Grant, the last known officer aboard Vanguard Station. Her voice came through in a series of broken, terrified recordings. The audio was crackling with static, but her words were unmistakable. They're awake. The hybrids are awake. They've killed almost everyone. I don't know how much longer I have. There's something else, something worse, coming. The Exhilarations aren't just interested in our technology anymore. They want our people. They'd been working with the hybrids to merge us, to become something else. Jack's blood ran cold. It was clear now. The hybrids were not just weapons. They were the key to something far larger and more dangerous than any war. But what was the Exhilarations' true plan? What had Commander Grant meant by merging? The answers were elusive, hidden behind layers of secrecy and fear. Suddenly, the station's lights flickered again, and the screen went black. Jack jumped back, his heart racing. What was going on? The whole station seemed to be reacting to him. The low hum of the systems grew louder, more insistent, as if the station itself was alive, aware of his presence. He knew he needed to be careful. If the hybrids were still aboard, there was no telling how they would react to his intrusion. His pulse quickened as the console suddenly rebooted, and a new message appeared on the screen. Access denied. Security breach detected. Before he could react, the room around him began to tremble. The entire station seemed to shift as if something massive was moving within it. Jack grabbed the side of the console to steady himself, his breath shallow. This wasn't a malfunction. The station wasn't just alive. It was reacting to him. The hybrids, or whatever had been lurking here, were aware of his presence now. They had been waiting, and now they were ready to act. Jack turned toward the door, his mind racing. The logs, the experiments, everything he had uncovered so far was leading to one inevitable conclusion. He wasn't supposed to be here, but it was too late to turn back. The deeper he went into the heart of Vanguard Station, the more the secrets of the Forbidden Alliance began to unfold. There was something much bigger at play than just rogue hybrids. The Exhilarations had a plan, and it wasn't just about war. It was about control. Control over humanity itself. As Jack sprinted down the dark corridors, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. They were coming, the hybrids, and he was running out of time. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted through the dark corridors of Vanguard Station. The walls, once pristine and immaculate, were now scarred by years of neglect and violence. The sound of his boots echoed off the steel floor, but there was something else, something heavier, something closer. The rhythmic pounding of footsteps behind him grew louder and more deliberate. He wasn't just running from his own fear anymore. He was being hunted. The hybrid soldiers, those twisted creations of human and Silurian DNA, were no longer just a threat. They were real, and they were aware of his presence. Jack's mind raced as he moved through the winding halls. He had to think quickly. The logs he uncovered had revealed terrifying truths. But now, as the metallic thud of the hybrid's footsteps drew nearer, those truths became his only chance of survival. The hybrid soldiers weren't just enhanced, they were lethal. They had been designed to be perfect killing machines, with abilities far beyond those of any normal soldier. And now, they were awake, alive, and angry. The only way out was deeper into the station. Jack's instincts kicked in, and he pushed forward, determined to reach the station's central hub. There had to be something there, something that could explain the sudden resurgence of the hybrids and their bizarre connection to the Exhilarations. The logs had been clear. The The hybrids weren't just rogue soldiers. They were part of a much larger plan. They had been created for a purpose, one that had nothing to do with war. No, they were meant for something darker, something more insidious. As he rounded the corner, he saw it, the central hub. The massive command center loomed before him, its doors slightly ajar. The lights flickered erratically inside, casting strange shadows across the room. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he stepped closer. The door creaked open with a soft groan, revealing a vast, dimly lit chamber. The walls were lined with monitors and consoles, all covered in layers of dust and debris. But in the center of the room, something stood out. An enormous, locked chamber, sealed tight with a heavy steel door. It was here, Jack realized, that the true horror of Vanguard Station had been kept hidden. The hybrid soldiers, their origins, their purpose, everything led back to this chamber. Jack approached cautiously, his pulse racing as he searched for a way inside. He had to know what was inside this chamber. The logs had mentioned a final experiment, but the details were vague. Whatever was hidden here, it was the key to understanding what had gone wrong, and perhaps what the Silurians had planned all along. With a quick glance over his shoulder, Jack began working on the control panel beside the chamber door. His hands moved quickly, bypassing security codes and overriding locks. His Marine training had prepared him for this moment, the high-stakes situations where every second mattered. The door's heavy locks disengaged with a low clunk, and the steel door slowly slid open, revealing a cold, sterile room. The first thing Jack noticed was the faint glow of bioluminescent lights illuminating rows of glass chambers. Inside each chamber was a figure, human, but not entirely. Their bodies were elongated and muscular, their skin an unnatural shade of gray, their eyes wide and unblinking, fixed in a gaze that felt unnatural. These were the hybrids, the final result of the forbidden alliance between humans and Silurians. And they were all dormant. Until now. Jack's stomach twisted as he stepped further into the room. The air felt thick, charged with some unknown energy. He could sense it. Something was coming. The hybrids, though frozen in their glass prisons, were linked to something larger, something alive. A voice crackled over the station's intercom, distorted and faint, but unmistakably clear. You shouldn't have come here. The plan is already in motion. They are awakening. Jack spun around, his heart racing. The voice sounded like Commander Layla Grant, her warnings echoing in his mind. They are awakening. The hybrids. The hybrids were waking up. The truth, the horrible truth, was becoming clear. The Silurians hadn't just been preparing for war. They had been preparing for something much more insidious. These hybrids weren't just weapons. They were the beginning of an invasion where humanity itself would become the ultimate weapon, part human, part Silurian. But that wasn't the endgame. No, the true purpose was much darker. As the chamber's lights flickered to life, a loud mechanical sound filled the room. The hybrids, one by one, were beginning to move. The glass tanks shattered, and the bodies of the hybrids began to shift and twitch as if awakening from a deep slumber. Jack's blood ran cold. There were more of them, dozens, maybe hundreds, sleeping, waiting for the moment when they could finally be unleashed. The first hybrid, a massive creature with glowing eyes, stepped forward from its tank, its inhuman form towering over Jack. Its body was a grotesque mix of Silurian agility and human strength. Jack's eyes widened in horror as the creature took a slow, deliberate step towards him. The hybrid's breathing was heavy and slow, its eyes locked on Jack with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. Then came the second hybrid, and the third. And soon, the entire room was filled with them, creatures born from the twisted experiments of the Forbidden Alliance. Jack's mind raced. He had to act fast. He couldn't fight them all. Not like this. He needed a plan. He needed to find a way to destroy the station before these hybrids could carry out their creator's dark purpose. But as Jack backed away, His eyes fell on the final piece of the puzzle. On the far side of the chamber, there was a large console, its screens flickering with a series of strange symbols. It wasn't just an interface. It was the core, the heart of Vanguard Station. And it was clear now that the hybrids weren't just here to fight. They were here to activate something. Jack didn't hesitate. He ran towards the console, his mind focused on one goal: shutting it down. If he didn't stop whatever had been set in motion, these hybrids would be the beginning of the end for humanity. And as the first hybrid lunged at him, Jack Mercer made his move. Jack's breath came in shallow, panicked bursts as he sprinted across the chamber toward the control console. The sound of the hybrid's footsteps behind him was deafening, heavy, deliberate, and closing in fast. The air in the room felt suffocating, thick with tension as the first of the creatures let out a guttural growl, its glowing eyes locked on him. Jack's heart raced, adrenaline flooding his system, but he couldn't afford to hesitate. Every moment counted. If he didn't reach that console and shut it down, it was all over. He dove toward the control panel, his hands shaking as he frantically searched for the override code. The hybrids weren't far behind now. He could feel their presence, hear their labored breathing, feel their hunger in the air. As his fingers raced across the keys, Jack could almost hear the words from Commander Lila Grant's last log echoing in his mind. They are awakening. The plan is already in motion. The hybrids weren't just weapons. They were part of something much larger, something catastrophic. The Exhilarations had designed this station for one purpose: to use it as the launching point for their invasion. An invasion where the hybrids would be their soldiers, and humanity would be the very fuel to power their army. Jack didn't have time to think about the bigger picture. He had to stop this now. His fingers hit the final sequence of buttons, and the console flickered to life with a harsh, bright flash. The screen glowed red, signaling the countdown. Core shutdown initiated. For a brief moment, everything seemed to stop. The hybrids, frozen in place, their glowing eyes fixed on Jack, seemed to pause. It was as though the entire station was holding its breath. But that calm didn't last long. A loud, rumbling sound filled the chamber, and the walls seemed to shake as if the very structure of Vanguard Station was reacting to the shutdown sequence. The hybrids growled, their bodies tensing in unison. They could feel it. They knew what was happening, and they didn't like it. Jack turned his head, just in time to see the first hybrid leap towards him, its massive claws reaching for his throat. He barely managed to duck, rolling to the side as it crashed into the console with a bone-jarring impact. Sparks flew from the damaged equipment, and the countdown continued. 5 minutes remaining. Come on, Jack muttered under his breath. Scrambling to his feet, he quickly scanned the console. The shutdown wasn't complete yet, but it was working. The core was beginning to destabilize. The hybrids were growing more agitated, the floor beneath Jack's feet trembling with every step they took. He knew the station's systems better than anyone, thanks to his years of service and military training, but nothing could have prepared him for the nightmare unfolding in front of him. The hybrids were closing in, their terrifying forms moving with inhuman speed. They weren't just killing machines. They were something more, an entire new breed of soldiers, born from a forbidden experiment designed to give their creators the upper hand in a war that was already being fought across the galaxy. But these hybrids weren't meant to be loyal. They were an abomination, and now they were awake, hunting, and ready to destroy anyone who stood in their way. Jack dove to the side again as another hybrid lunged at him. It missed by inches, crashing into the console once more. The sound of its snarls filled the chamber, and Jack could hear the others closing in. Sensing that the shutdown was nearing completion, he had to keep them away, had to buy himself just a little more time. Come on, Mercer. You've got this, he gritted through clenched teeth as he scrambled towards a nearby control panel, his fingers moving over the buttons as quickly as possible. 3 minutes remaining. The hybrids were getting closer. Jack could feel their breath on his neck, could hear their sickening growls as they circled him like sharks. He wasn't afraid of dying. He had faced death many times before, in battle, on distant planets, but he couldn't let this station fall into the hands of the Kylorians. He couldn't let them succeed in whatever sick plan they had set in motion. If Vanguard Station activated the core, there would be nothing left of humanity. These hybrids, these weapons, he could see it now, were just the beginning of the invasion. The last hybrid lunged at him with terrifying speed, its claws outstretched. Jack sidestepped just in time, barely avoiding the creature's lethal strike. The hybrid's claws scraped across the metal floor, sending sparks flying. Jack, fueled by desperation, grabbed a nearby metal rod, using it to strike the hybrid across the face. The blow disoriented it, but it wasn't enough to stop the monster. The countdown ticked down another second. 2 minutes. With everything he had, Jack launched himself toward the core's main terminal, hoping he had enough time to finish what he had started. His hand slammed against the control panel, frantically typing in a series of emergency override codes. But the system was fighting back. It wasn't going to let him stop it that easily. As the hybrid attacked again, Jack felt a searing pain across his shoulder, a claw swipe that left a trail of blood. He gritted his teeth, refusing to let the injury slow him down. The hybrid's claws dug deeper, but Jack fought back, twisting free from its grip and delivering a sharp blow to its throat. The creature staggered back, gasping for air, and Jack finally hit the final sequence. 1 minute remaining. The countdown clock flashed in red, counting down the seconds. The core was moments from going critical, and Jack could feel the air around him growing hotter, the power of the station beginning to build. The hybrids were frantic now, hissing, their movements erratic as they realized what was happening. But it was too late. With a final, deafening beep, the core began to shut down. A massive shockwave erupted from the central hub, sending Jack crashing to the ground. The station's walls rattled violently, and the lights flickered before dimming completely. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, the entire station seemed to hold its breath. And then, silence. Jack lay on the floor, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the last of the hybrids collapsed around him. The station's systems, once so alive with power and malevolent energy, had gone dark. The countdown had reached 0, and the core had finally been shut down. But Jack knew this wasn't over. The exhilarations were still out there, and Vanguard Station was just one part of their twisted plan. The war was coming, but at least for now, the invasion had been stopped, thanks to the actions of a single ex-Marine who had uncovered the horrifying truth. As Jack stumbled to his feet, his body battered and bruised, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was only just beginning. And this time, humanity might not be so lucky.